What happens after you die? Not what you hope happens, not what makes you feel better at night. What actually happens, according to every major religion on Earth right now? Because here's what's strange. Billions of people walking around today, going to work, scrolling their phones, eating dinner, and every single one of them has a completely different answer to that question stored somewhere in the back of their mind. And most of them have never sat down and compared those answers side by side. That's what we're doing today. 6 major religions. One question: what happens when it's over? And I promise you, by the end of this video, you will never see death the same way again. Some of what you're about to hear will shock you. Some of it will challenge everything you were raised to believe. And some of it might actually give you something you weren't expecting. Peace. Let's start at the beginning. Islam. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine a man named Yusuf. He lived a decent life, prayed most of his prayers, tried to be honest, made mistakes like everyone else. Today, he died. His family washes his body gently 3 times, the same way he would have cleaned himself before prayer. They wrap him in a plain white cloth, no jewelry, no expensive casket. It doesn't matter that he had a nice car or a big house. Rich and poor go into the ground the same way, everyone equal in the end. They lower him into the grave before the day is over, because Islam says the body should be buried quickly, within 24 hours, if possible. He's placed on his right side, facing toward Mecca. A prayer is said over him. No bowing, no prostration, just standing, just asking Allah for mercy. And then the family walks away, but Yusuf doesn't stop existing. That's where most people get it wrong. They think death is the end of the story. In Islam, it's more like the end of the first chapter. Because now comes Barzakh, the barrier world, the unseen life between death and resurrection that most people have never heard of. 2 angels appear in his grave. Their names are Munkar and Nakir. And they ask him 3 questions. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is your prophet? If Yusuf lived his faith honestly, the answers come without effort. His grave expands into something spacious, comfortable, filled with light. A window opens, showing him his place in paradise. He waits there in peace, not even aware of how much time is passing. But if he struggled, if he claimed the label without living the meaning, his tongue freezes. The words won't form, and the walls of his grave begin to close in, crushing. The earth itself becomes the punishment. Then, on the day of judgment, a trumpet sounds. Every soul that ever existed is pulled back, billions of people standing together on one massive plane under a sun that has been pulled terrifyingly close. People are drowning in their own sweat, some up to their ankles, some up to their chests, some completely submerged, based on the weight of what they carried in life. Every deed is placed on a scale, not just the big things, the smallest act of kindness, the cruelest private thought, the atom of good you forgot you did, nothing missing, nothing hidden. And then comes the Sirat, a bridge stretched directly over hellfire, thinner than a strand of hair, sharper than a blade. Everyone crosses it, no exceptions, no shortcuts around it. Some believers cross like lightning. 1 second and they're on the other side, standing at the gates of paradise before they even had time to be afraid. Others cross like wind, fast but still feeling the heat below. Some walk, some crawl on their hands and knees, hooks rising from the fire grabbing at them. The prophets cross first, calling out for their followers. And Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, stands at the end repeating one thing: "O Allah, save them, those who rejected faith fall." Islam describes 7 levels of hell and 8 levels of paradise. The highest level, the Firdaus, is what believers are promised when they are told paradise is waiting. Judaism. Now here is where something interesting happens, because Islam and Judaism bury their dead almost the same way. Within 24 hours, body washed by a holy burial society, wrapped in a simple white shroud, plain wooden coffin placed into the ground without decoration or display. Wealth means nothing at that moment. Same practice, completely different understanding of what comes next. In Judaism, hell is not permanent. Jewish texts describe a place called Gehenna, but it is not the fire and torment that most people imagine when they hear that word. It is closer to purification, like your soul being put through a deep and painful cleaning process, everything impure burned away. And the maximum time anyone spends there is 12 months. Even the worst person who ever lived, according to Jewish understanding, eventually comes out the other side. After that, the righteous enter Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, a place of closeness to God, spiritual peace, and rest. And here is something most people do not know. Judaism teaches that righteous people from every nation, not just Jews, can find their place there, but death is not the final destination. Judaism holds a deep belief in the world to come called Olam Haba. The idea is that this world we live in right now is broken, incomplete. And one day, the Messiah will arrive, restore justice, and the dead will be physically resurrected, bodies returning to souls. People living again in a perfected world where suffering no longer has a place. Not every Jewish community agrees on the details. Orthodox Jews take the physical resurrection literally. Reformed Jews tend to focus on the eternal life of the soul rather than the return of the body. And Kabbalah, the mystical tradition within Judaism, teaches something that sounds almost ancient and strange until you think about it. Gilgul. Reincarnation. The soul returning to earth in different bodies, life after life, until whatever it came here to learn or repair has been completed. Same people burying their dead the same way. But the road they believe that person is walking after? Completely different depending on who you ask. Christianity. Christianity grew directly out of Judaism, but it introduced something that changed the entire conversation about what happens between death and resurrection. It gave that space a name and a purpose. Catholics call it purgatory. When a Catholic dies, the soul is judged immediately, not on the last day, right now, right at the moment of death. And the outcome is one of three things: heaven, hell, or purgatory. Purgatory is not punishment. That is the key misunderstanding. It is preparation. It is for people who are destined for heaven but whose souls are not clean enough to enter yet. Think of it as a spiritual hospital. The healing happens there. The remaining attachment to sin is removed. And then when the soul is ready, it enters the presence of God completely. What makes Catholic belief unique is that this process can be helped from the outside. The people you left behind can still do something for you. Their prayers, their masses offered on your behalf, their acts of love, these things can shorten your time in purgatory. This is why Catholics pray for the dead. The relationship between the living and the dead is not finished the moment the body goes into the ground. Everyone in purgatory eventually reaches heaven. It is temporary by definition. Hell, in Catholic teaching, is the permanent choice, eternal separation from God. Not something God forces on anyone, but the final consequence of a life that consistently chose against Him. Heaven is described as the beatific vision, seeing God directly, not through symbols or scriptures or prayer, but face to face, complete and permanent joy. Orthodox Christianity carries the same foundation, but adds something that feels almost like a mirror image of Islamic Barzakh. After death, the soul spends about 40 days on a kind of journey, revisiting the moments of its life. In some traditions, this is described as passing through aerial toll houses, places where the soul is questioned about specific sins, lying, pride, anger, cruelty. The living pray intensely during these 40 days, believing that their prayers still reach and help the soul as it moves through. And Orthodox Christianity holds a view of heaven and hell that is unlike anything else. They are not two separate places. They are two different experiences of the same reality, the presence of God. For those who loved Him, that presence is warmth and peace and joy beyond words. For those who rejected Him, that same presence becomes overwhelming and painful, not because God changed, because they did. Protestant Christianity cuts through all of this. No purgatory, no 40-day journey, no prayers for the dead. When you die, you go directly to heaven or hell based on whether you placed your faith in Jesus. Simple, final, immediate, three branches of the same tree, three different maps for the same destination. Hinduism, now everything changes. In Hinduism, death is not a destination, it is a transition. One more step in a journey that has been going on for longer than you can remember. When a Hindu dies, the body is cremated. Fire is the purifier. The eldest son lights the funeral pyre. After hours, what was a human being becomes ash, and that ash is carried to a sacred river, the most holy being the Ganges, and released into the current. The body returns to nature completely, but the soul, the Atma, does not go anywhere permanent, because in Hinduism the soul is eternal. It has always existed. It never dies. When the body is finished, the soul simply moves to the next one, like removing one set of clothing and putting on another. And you have done this before. Many times, you just have no memory of it. Messengers of Yama, the god of death, arrive to guide the soul to his realm. There, every action from the life just lived is reviewed. Every thought, every intention, every kindness, and every cruelty, good karma and bad karma, are measured against each other based on what the scale shows. The soul might enter Swarga, a heavenly realm of peace and reward, or it might enter Naraka, a realm of suffering and consequence. But here is the part that surprises most people. Both of these are temporary. Once the karma from that life has been worked through, the soul is reborn again into a new life, a new body, shaped by what was carried forward from the last one. The circumstances you are born into are not random in this belief. Whether you arrive in wealth or poverty, with health or illness, into a loving family or a painful one, all of it traces back to choices made in previous lives. This cycle has a name: Samsara, endless birth, death, and rebirth. And the goal of every Hindu life, regardless of the specific tradition, is to escape it entirely. Liberation. Moksha. How you understand moksha depends on which tradition you come from. For followers of Vishnu, it means reaching Vaikuntha, the eternal realm of Vishnu, where the soul rests in peace and never returns to the cycle. For followers of Shiva, moksha often means merging into Shiva himself. The individual identity dissolves. What was, you becomes part of everything. Advaita Vedanta, one of the most influential philosophical schools in Hinduism, takes this even further. It says your individual soul and the universal soul were never actually separate. You always were God. You just forgot. Moksha is simply waking up and remembering. Buddhism began inside Hinduism. It took the idea of rebirth and karma and completely rebuilt it around a single radical claim. There is no permanent soul. Think about that for a moment. No permanent soul. So what exactly gets reborn? The answer Buddhism gives is consciousness, not a self, not a soul. Just a stream of awareness that continues. The classic image is one candle lighting another. The second flame came from the first. They are connected, but they are not the same flame. This is why Buddhism uses the word rebirth rather than reincarnation, because reincarnation implies a self moving from body to body. Buddhism says there is no fixed self to move anywhere, just patterns of thought and karma continuing forward into a new form. In Theravada Buddhism, practiced widely across Thailand and Sri Lanka, rebirth happens instantly at the moment of death. No waiting period. The quality of your consciousness at the moment you die determines where it moves next. This can be any of 6 realms. Gods experiencing long ages of pleasure. Humans, which is actually considered the best realm for reaching enlightenment because humans uniquely have both suffering and awareness. Animals. Hungry ghosts, beings consumed by desire they can never satisfy, and hell realms, where suffering is intense but critically not eternal. Tibetan Buddhism adds a layer to this that is one of the most detailed and fascinating accounts of death in any tradition on earth. They describe a 49-day process called the bardo, a between state of consciousness after death and before rebirth. In the first moments after death, a brilliant, clear light appears. If the consciousness recognizes that light as its own true nature, liberation happens immediately. The cycle ends, but most people panic. They flinch away from the brightness. They miss the moment. Then other visions follow, peaceful figures appearing, offering guidance. If the person recognizes these as projections of their own mind, they can still break free. Then wrathful figures, terrifying and overwhelming, still projections, still chances for liberation, still moments that most miss. Tibetan monks traditionally sit beside the body and read aloud from the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan book of the dead, for the entire 49 days, reading instructions to the dead person, guiding them through what they are experiencing, reminding them not to be afraid, reminding them what they are seeing is not real. If liberation does not happen during the bardo, Rebirth occurs in one of the 6 realms. The ultimate goal in Buddhism is nirvana. Not a better place, not paradise, the complete ending of the cycle. No more craving, no more grasping, no more self to suffer. Some describe it as a peace that has no words. Others say it is like a drop of water that has finally returned to the ocean. Zoroastrianism. This is the oldest religion we are covering today, older than Christianity, older than Islam. Some historians believe that Zoroastrian ideas about heaven and hell, about judgment and resurrection, about angels and the final defeat of evil, actually shaped the beliefs of the religions that came after it. Zoroastrians traditionally did not bury or burn their dead because both the earth and fire were considered sacred. Instead, they left bodies in structures called towers of silence open to the sky, where vultures would consume them. The body returned to nature without contaminating what was holy. Today, most Zoroastrians bury or cremate because modern societies have changed around them. After death, the soul stays close to the body for 3 days while prayers are offered. Then, on the 4th day, it approaches the Chinvat bridge, the bridge of judgment that divides the world of the living from whatever comes next. At that bridge, something extraordinary happens. A figure appears to the soul, its own conscience given form, called the Dina. If the person lived with honesty, with right thought, right word, and right action, the Dana appears as a beautiful young woman. The bridge becomes wide, easy, almost welcoming. The soul crosses into the house of song, paradise, light, joy, the presence of Ahura Mazda, the god of truth and goodness. If the person lived with deception and cruelty, the Daina appears terrifying. The bridge narrows to something impossible. The soul falls into the house of lies, darkness and suffering. But here is the part that makes Zoroastrianism unlike almost everything else. Even that is not permanent. Because Zoroastrianism teaches that history itself has a final chapter. A cosmic battle between the god of light and the force of darkness has been playing out since the beginning of time. Every choice every human being has ever made was a vote in that battle. Every act of honesty strengthened the light. Every lie fed the darkness. At the end of time, the force of darkness is completely and finally defeated. What comes next is called Frashokereti, the final renewal. The dead are resurrected. Even the souls in hell are purified. Some texts describe rivers of molten metal flowing across the world. For the righteous, it passes over them like warm milk. For those being purified, it burns away everything impure, until what remains is clean. Everyone in the end is saved. Evil is not just defeated, it is erased. The entire universe is restored. Only about 200,000 Zoroastrians remain in the world today, mostly in India and Iran. But the ideas that came from this small ancient faith shaped the afterlife beliefs of billions of people who have no idea where those ideas first came from. So here we are. 6 religions, 6 answers to the same question. Islam says you are fully conscious in the grave right now, experiencing whatever your deeds built around you, waiting for a trumpet that will call you back. Judaism says your soul is being purified, and one day your body will return to you in a world made whole. Christianity says you stood before God the moment your heart stopped, and where you are now depends entirely on what you chose while you were breathing. Hinduism says you have been here before many times, and you are in the process of learning something your soul decided it needed to learn across more lifetimes than you can count. Buddhism says there is no permanent you to go anywhere, only a current of consciousness still caught in the pull of craving, moving toward the day it finally lets go. And Zoroastrianism says the story is not finished yet, that evil will not win, and that in the end, every single soul finds its way home. 6 traditions, 6 languages for the same mystery. But here is what strikes me about all of them. Not one says that your choices right now do not matter. Not one says that the way you treat people today is irrelevant to what comes next. Not one says that kindness, honesty, and the effort to be better are wasted. They disagree about almost everything, but they all agree on that. You are still here. You are still choosing, and whatever comes after this, every tradition on earth is telling you the same thing in a different language. This moment counts. If this video made you think differently about death, share it with someone who needs that conversation. And if you want to go deeper into what Islam specifically says about what happens in the grave, I made a full video breaking down every single stage of Barzakh in detail. Watch that one next, because what the Prophet described about the unseen life happening right now is something most people have never heard, and it will completely change how you think about the way you are living. Hit subscribe so you never miss what comes next.